What if ETERNAMAX Eternatus was in Gen 1 OU? But, like, for real this time. Why do I say that? That's because I once did this video before, but with that one, it was a joke. Because I was like, look at this thing's stats. People requested it, but, like, why? It doesn't make any sense. It's just busted. But I did it, and I did wacky things like Elite Sheet, Executor with Sweet Power to beat it 1v1. So with that video, some things managed to win, but I was like, wow, this shows how powerful Gen 1 is, but didn't take it seriously. Until today. That's because a few days ago, in my Discord server, one of my top moderators, Sotina, she was talking about how if ETERNAMAX was in RBY, she generally thinks it would be only a top 7 Pokemon, not even in the top 5, which certainly got my interest. And then she started making some points that I thought were actually pretty solid. The main two being that, one, its typing is just straight up awful for RBY. Quite possibly, I think it's the worst typing you could possibly have for Gen 1 Ubers. It's weak to Blizzard. It's weak to Earthquake. It's weak to Psychic. These are some of the most common attacking types. And what's the other one? Body Slam? You don't actually care about. Body Slam, Explosion, Hyper Beam, these are fine. In fact, funny enough, Explosion does less to you with Eternatus than it does the Rhydon. But yeah, so like, its stats are just kind of, you know, what's the word? Astoundingly bulky. So even with your god-awful typing, that's like the only reason you can even consider this a debate. Because, yeah, you have over 200 in, like, your defensive stats. That is just not a function. Like, put the HP at the max here, and that is over 700 HP. But luckily, there's another thing that is the reason Sotina thinks ETERNAMAX would only be a top 7 Pokemon. And that's your power points, which I think this is far more reasonable. Ignore Body Slam, this is from Gen 9, and I'm like in the Gen 8 team builder. But if you look at all the other moves, you have, Agility, so you can negate any speed reductions, minus any amnesia shenanigans, which you will see later. You have things like Flamethrower, I guess. Avoid the screens at all cost, because with Light Screen and Reflect, you're actually so strong that you can actually overlap, so suddenly everything can just one-shot you. There's no point in rest, because you have Recover. And yeah, there's just not a lot here, really. You do have a Eterna Beam, which is a Dragon-type Hyper Beam, and Dynamax Cannon as a signature, which is just a stronger Dragon Pulse. But the issue with both of those is that they're only 8 power points each. So, if you just go with Gen 8, and I think you kind of have to use Flamethrower, but Flamethrower is just kind of bad overall. But thankfully, Gen 9, you do get Body Slam, which does provide a lot of power points. But not enough. Not enough for Mewtwo, and not enough to, like, do great damage against Mew unless it's a crit. So, Mewtwo has Blizzard, Ice Beam, Psychic. These are good. Mew likes to run Earthquake a lot. So the question is, are these Pokemon able to out-damage Eternatus? And the answer is a big, fat yesn't. Like, with Mew, I think it could go either way. I think Eternatus having higher base speed puts it more of it in its favor. But if Mew has Soft Boiled and gets Sword Stance and Thunder Wave, I think that set can probably beat Eternatus, like, eventually. Although it definitely, like, has to do with, like, Paralysis luck. And even then, Eternatus can definitely win with crits or, just outlasting Soft Boiled PP. But Mewtwo is a different story. Barrier Mewtwo is basically just as untouchable as Eternatus, but the main difference between the two is that well, mostly Mewtwo is just having a better typing, but needs to actually set up, while Eternatus is just naturally that bulky. Self-destruct Mewtwo is not very good, at least against Eternatus. It will definitely survive, so like try not to do that. But then you got like standard amnesia, which works good enough against Eternatus. You'll also have like Thunder Wave. Thunder Wave on Mewtwo is like the best way for these two to even each other out, especially since Thunder Wave gives you a lot of power points to stall. So, how much does Mewtwo actually do at full offense? Well, you'll see it for the replays, but with Barrier 2, with Ice Beam, it does about a third. And then Psychic with Max Special, I think only barely gets like a 2-hit KO. And even then, I think it's at 51%, so I think it's actually a damage range. And if it's not a damage range, it's like barely 2-hit KO. Which, since Eternatus has agility, means that you most likely are never going to... What's it called? You're just never going to be able to consistently beat Eternatus without, well, just paralysis luck. Not even a crit, because a crit Psychic only does a third, which is insane that as a super effective critical Psychic, getting a crit is a bad thing, but that just shows how strong Eternatus is. But Eternatus, on the other hand, doesn't do that much damage either. You need a critical Dynamax cannon just to do like a 40% to Mewtwo, I think. So Mewtwo pretty easily just heals that off. Not to mention with Amnesia, you could just waste power points and do basically nothing. And Body Slam does basically negligible damage unless you get a crit. And even then, I think it's like 30-something%. So like Mewtwo, for the most part, just doesn't care. Mewtwo handles Eternatus pretty well, I would say. So it's a pretty awkward situation. It's one where Mewtwo is definitely favored in most cases, but also Eternatus has 130 speed, so it's more than capable of, you know, just critting things out, but both have the exact same crit rate, so it's not like Mewtwo is at a disadvantage or anything. And since, you know, like I said, you need the crits just to do good damage to Mewtwo, it's only a case where you can get super lucky. So, it's very RNG reliant, but for the most part, it just kind of ends with both being exhausted. And to be honest, I think that's actually kind of cool in a way. I think it's cool that you have the strongest Pokemon in history with Mewtwo, and then you got the strongest Pokemon of today with Eternatus. It's the main example I can possibly give for something when you're talking about an unstoppable object versus... Well, no, that I said it wrong, sorry. I meant unstoppable force versus immovable object. Because Mewtwo, with the Amnesias, it's basically killing everything. You are just boned. And then you got Eternatus, which you're just not getting off the field. Like, maybe with special drops, but that's about it. And even then, Executor with a special drop, not doing much to Eternatus. And Eternatus against itself, you will see in the replay, Eternatus with a special drop gets hit with Dynamax Cannon, and the percentage is only in the 30s. Yeah, this thing is that bulky, but also not that offensive enough to actually cause problems and issues. So when it comes to whether Eternatus is top 7 or not, so Tina, like, thinks so. I think there's a good argument, but my issue is, even though you can stall out Eternatus with the Mewtwo and, like, debatably Mew, and even though, like, other things like Starmie, Jinx, Tauros, Rhydon, Gengar, a lot of things have super effective coverage against it, but you can, like, stall an Eternatus and then use your own, which I think can make things very... Well, I want to say unhealthy, but this is kind of just like a test to see who actually plays actual Gem-1 Ubers or not. Because if you actually think about it, Eternatus ETERNAMAX is literally just Barrier 2. Like, is this very different from two Mewtwo's with Amnesia and Barrier stalling each other out? I think not. I definitely think not. So, it's... like, it's kind of crazy, but Eternatus is just kind of fine. I don't want to say a good inclusion. I think it stalls everything out. But it's genuinely nothing that Ubers can handle already. And that's the surprising part. It's just more of what you see with Barrier 2. Which I don't think is going to make things better, except for one instance. And that one instance is Generation Jumble. What's Generation Jumble, you might ask? Well, in my Discord server, we like to host tournaments based on my what-if scenarios. And sometimes we get things that are too strong for the format that we tried adding. For example, Tapu Koko with Nature's Madness, Darmanitan Zen Mode Galarian form with, like 135 speed and Earthquake. You have Sneasel with Dire Claw. We have the Mega Mewtwo's. And just other things that are just way too good for OU. But the issue is, most of the Pokemon that we add, they end up being 120 speed or higher when they end up getting banned. So, an actual Uber's tier is kind of just unplayable. You just have so much offense with these insane crit rates, and there's basically nothing to really handle them outside of Mewtwo. So that's where ETERNAMAX could potentially come in, because even with how insane some of the attacking Pokemon are up there, and even with their great crit rates, ETERNAMAX low-key doesn't care. It can kind of handle all of them, which I haven't tested the format out myself, but it could actually be what's needed to, like, hold the entire tier together and actually make it playable. If you think it's worth testing, let me know. Especially if you are in the Discord server. Granted, I think Saltina's the only one willing to give it a test. And I would love to myself, but I just don't think I can make good teams for Ubers. But I'd be willing to give it a try. By the way, speaking of the Discord server, you should totally join. Because after we were done with the replay, we also talked about GSC. Talked about how Eternatus would do there. And in GSC, it's kind of the same sentiment. But instead of Mewtwo, which is still already good on its own, it's instead Snorlax. And Snorlax also probably can take on Eternatus on its own. Especially with things like Curse or Belly Drum. So overall, yeah, it's not as busted as you might think. Although it's definitely debatable. Whether it's the high end or low end of the top 5 or the top 7 or whatever, that's up to you to decide. Now, we're not going to have a tier list at the end of the video, because outside of Mewtwo, the rest doesn't really matter. And also, we don't have a lot of 1v1 replays either, because I realized very, very quickly, this thing straight up just doesn't work for 1v1 replays. The best way to show how strong ETERNAMAX is or isn't would be with a proper 6v6. So after I made 2 replays with Mewtwo, I realized I needed someone to help me. And who better than the person who talked about this to begin with, Saltina. So we're going to have 2 replays of just ETERNAMAX Eternatus versus Mewtwo. And then we're going to see a proper 6v6 battle between the two of them. We have a lot of stuff like this in the server. Except we do it with, more player Pokemon. And later, most likely this month, like the end of it most likely, we're actually going to host a new tournament. But you get to choose the format, the tier, the Pokemon, etc. But for now, let's get right into the replay. Only one of 2. And this one's going to be pretty fast, because this was the first replay I did, and this one's just crit rate galore. So, here we have the King of Ubers himself, Mewtwo, going for Barrier, and it does not matter. That's a crit. And that crit also did 34%. And there's Dynamax Cannon, which, did 46%. That was a short replay. Yeah, you just look at that, and, you think to yourself, well, duh, it's ETERNAMAX Eternatus. What were you expecting? And I can answer that for you. What I was expecting was this replay. This is one where Barrier Mewtwo actually pops off. Or, I don't know if popping off is the right word. It's a very passive Mewtwo set. But one where Eternatus kind of low-key struggles. And this is also a perfect example of why crit rates aren't everything. Because, like, yeah, Eternatus is a great crit rate, but this Mewtwo basically got the setup for free, and there was nothing Eternatus can do about it. Didn't even get paralysis with Body Slam. Ain't that embarrassing. So, yeah, that's a Mewtwo with max stats. You finally get the paralysis, well, too little too late. And that's a crit, which, yeah, a critical Ice Beam only doing 27%. That's just funny. But take a look, and you will see Ice Beam. It's not like... Or it's good damage. I'm not gonna act like it isn't. Or you're not even gonna get to see it, thanks to, the crits. Which is, funny. That was a misclick there with the recover. But yeah, you finally get an attack, and it does only 37%. A Mewtwo with max special is not even doing 40% to Eternatus with Ice Beam. Blizzard would do more, but good God, with how little power points Blizzard has, it is absolutely in no way even remotely worth it to use it against Eternatus. That is an awful idea. And I would not be surprised if Blizzard, at least on Mewtwo and Mew, kind of falls off. With everything else, yeah, it's still pretty good. But, like, with Eternatus in the format, it needs power points now more than ever. Okay. Now we have a match to go and look at. It is going to be kind of long. Pretty long, I would say. So, I don't even know if... Do I, I'm going to start by immediately putting on fast. Let's just start it already, but, yeah, I'm not sure if I should just give it the play-by-play, or if I should just, explain more context about Eternatus and how it can, be kind of scary and stuff. But yeah, let's also talk about how you still have Mewtwo and Mew in the, on your teams as well. It's the fact that you just have these two other amazing Pokemon. Or actually, I think I do know what I can talk about. There are definitely some Pokemon that people think could be better, and I guess I'll talk about them here. Cloyster, Zapdos, there's, no shot in hell those are going to be, better than you. If anything, I think Eternatus' inclusion could make, especially Zapdos, fall off a lot. Because Zapdos, I think, would struggle immensely with Eternatus in the format. Cloyster might be fine, but it might have to switch to Ice Beam instead of Blizzard, which kind of sucks. However, there are 5 Pokemon that are probably going to end up being better than Eternatus. And that is Mewtwo and Mew. That's self-explanatory. Executor. Executor is so just as good as ever. And since Executor is bulky and has Psychic, it also means that it can tank Eternatus decently well enough. Dynamax Cannon. Yeah, Dynamax Cannon will hurt a bit. But also, you have Stun Spore, Sweet Powder, Psychic, has hands. And Eternatus, well, the most important part with Dynamax Cannon is the fact that it's only 8 power points. So, you could use it on Executor. But any chance that you can use it, that's just 1 power point less for Mewtwo and Mew. And you're kind of forced to, wait for them and hope you get a crit. Which, as you can imagine, is really, really not good. Also, try to pay attention to the chat if you will, because, we also did a lot of talking there. A lot of it was stupid, but for some instances, especially with Slutina, we did get some really, genuine, valuable insight. So when we get to those parts, I will try to pause and read it out for you. Also, sorry if I'm, taking, pauses between this. This is not my first recording. I had to, re-record this. And as you can imagine, having the voice over a 160-turn game, my throat's just kind of killing me right now. But thankfully, I got my, water with me right here, so... Try to be quick, but I am trying to occasionally, get some, quick drinks in so my throat doesn't, kill me, proper. But yeah, as you can see from the game right now, we're turn 45, And this is when I realized I can just use, like, you know, agility for stuff. But, yeah, like, as you can see here, Dynamax Cannon's already half gone, and Body Slam is, like, half gone as well. So really, really not that good. And here's something interesting that Satina said, and this is with, this is, like, in contrast to both Agility and Amnesia failing since both Pokemon have their stats maxed out. But she said, not gonna lie, the move's failing is good. If you're able to max out, you could keep ignoring the drops. But, like, you know, that's, like, in reference to, I believe, how with Amnesia, even with Psychic, well, yeah, like, here's more context here. I mean, you haven't gotten any drops until now, right? And I think that's Apollo talking about how I didn't get any Psychic special drops because my Eternatus is just that good at dodging. But then Satina said, well, yeah, but, you know, Amnesia reapplies speed drop, even when it fails. Reapply doesn't work anymore since, you know, we're both at +6. Same with Agility interaction with Para. Failing it makes you stronger, like, way stronger. So that's pretty interesting, I would say. But, yeah, we're in for a long ride. So Executor being useful, it's not because it, you know, beats Eternatus 1v1. It's just more so because its utility outside is so pretty good, and also can just annoy Eternatus as well. But to be honest, it doesn't really need to. Like, Eternatus needs to use everything on Mewtwo, who stalls it out anyways. So that's actually a benefit for everything that's not a legendary Pokemon. If you're not Mewtwo and Mew, it doesn't matter how bad you do, you are forcing the Eternatus to use a move. And because of that, it actually kind of struggles immensely. So that is, like, you know, that's a bit of a bummer for Eternatus here. So that's also part of the reason why I named, like, the 5, like, in that order, like Toro or Executor, then Tauros and Snorlax. Basically, like, the Pokemon that are already here can just kind of pick up where they left off. They are not doing that much, like, not really anything differently, but they can still do what they usually do. And now they have the added benefit of just, if they have to deal with Eternatus, they can do basically anything, and Eternatus is kinda still struggling. Doesn't mean you should just waste everything, you still gotta be smart about it. But yeah, Executor, the third best Pokemon, and then the fourth is Tauros. Tauros can still do Tauros things. A little less good now, because, yeah, that's 7% on a Body Slam. So it might go down a little bit, but also probably not. Because it still, you know, can sweep everything else. And if Mewtwo and Eternatus can stall out each other, by the way, Eternatus can stall out itself. So, in many ways, when you actually go down to it, it's really just a nothing include. I can't say the word. Inclusion. I don't know why I can't say that word. There's another video I did where I struggled to say the word. Involvement. Wait. Is that how you're supposed to say it? It's not inclusion, it's involvement. Am I just dumb? Am I just... Oh my... I really need to, like, stop being lazy and pick up streaming already. I mean this in the worst way possible about myself, but I think I would make for a good streamer. Let me know what you think in the comments. But yeah, I think I just realized right now that I'm dumb, which is very unfortunate. But yeah, going back to the top 5. The 5th one would be Snorlax. And Snorlax, well, it could just do Snorlax things. Body Slam can paralyze. Earthquake super effective. Self-destruct is going to do minimal damage to Eternatus. But the neat part's more so just denying Eternatus a turn. Which means that you can go for self-destruct. And then you can switch to your Mewtwo. And then maybe try to go for the offensive, which genuinely might work. But it doesn't really matter, because again, Snorlax is tanky. And to be honest, no one really uses Amnesia or Restlax in Ubers. But I think there's a good argument to do so with Eternatus. Because Body Slam low-key not doing that much damage. And Dynamax Beam only has 8 power points. So it's really not that hard for Snorlax to just stall the heck out of Eternatus. Which is honestly a big a big boost there. So honestly, it's not like a lot, but I would actually predict that Snorlax would actually be the fourth best Pokemon, surpassing Tauros. Not by a lot. Like, when there's only, like, one difference in the slots, it's really... Like, yeah, like, genuinely, who cares? But regardless, if there's anything else, like, there's, like, Gengar, but, like... I personally think Eternatus is a top 6 mon, but I don't think it matters too much. And again, I think it's still pretty annoying that when you actually look at it, it's not really providing much. It's just... The best way to describe ETERNAMAX is just the training dummy in Smash Bros. It is like a big... It can tank hits, but that's it. But yeah, check that out. Like, see that 32% Dynamax cannon with a special drop? That's just stupid. It's just really, really stupid. You know what the sad part is? It's like tanking that special, like, or special attack has a special drop. But despite that, it's paralyzed, special drop, and it's still stalling out the Dynamax cannon. Dynamax cannon lost half its power points already. That's just ridiculous. And it can definitely stall out the body some power points as well. If I wanted to, I could have actually just sat there and ate up the Eternatus until they switched. It's stupid. It's just so stupid. Like, seriously, like, why do we even bother testing this? It's like, what would you use instead? Like, well, I'll be misplaying like hell, so like, ignore that. I'm a good player, I promise. Oh yeah, there's also Eterna Beam. But Eterna Beam is just genuinely kind of bad. You are struggling so much with power points, and it would hit hard, but I promise you most of the time you're not getting killed with Eterna Beam. So it would mostly be a death swat, forcing you to go for a different attack. I guess like Sotina here, you could just not use Agility. But Agility is huge, not just for speed control. But as you can tell, like, you know, not counting Recover, or even with Recover, Agility is by far the move you have with the most amount of power points. So, it's like really, really useful for just that alone. And yeah, see that? 19% with Explosion. It's so stupid. It's just so stupid. Why did I bother with this? Or actually almost didn't. Low-key, I did the first two replays and was like, is this even worth it? So I pinged Sotina, and she was like, yeah, classic case of just, you know, 1v1 bias. So we decided to do this, and it was, you know, one of the matches of all time. You want to know the scariest part? The scariest part is that Sotina has experience playing in Gen 1 Ubers tournaments before, so she's very familiar with the, like, barrier 2 and stuff like that. So this match wasn't even that crazy. Like, it genuinely was just a typical Ubers match for her. And that is, like... yeah. Also, I am not gonna, like, pause. I'm not gonna pause all of this, but we chatted a lot. We chatted, like, a lot during these, like, last two turns. You can, like, pause this yourself. You want to rate this. But I ain't doing all that. You gotta, like, take care of this yourself, alright? But yeah, that was the... not even the longest game I've ever played. I myself have actually done worse. So, like, in this chat here, I was, like, kind of dramatic. But that's only for the sake of, like, the Discord server. I tend to be more, like, dramatic and expressive when I'm with people, just to be funny. But for Gen 1 OU, I have played, like, 200 turn games before. And with Gen 3 ADV, I've also played, like, games that gone to, like, 157 turns. So, like, this is low-key nothing new for me either. It's just, you know, Eternatus is a very stalling Pokemon. It was just kind of, or not even boring, because I was kind of interested to see, yeah, I was interested to see who would actually win. I had a feeling it was gonna be Sotina, but, like, you know, like, it was worth a try. So, again, no tier list, because it really doesn't matter. Eternatus is not really fighting its other Pokemon, it's trying to manage its own power points. So we don't need a viability ranking for that. But now that it's all over, what do you think? Do you think Eternatus would be a top 7 Pokemon? Do you think it'd be top 3? Do you think it'd be better than Mew or even better than Mewtwo? Let me know in the comments below. I like to think that this long game here is probably enough to where you can get a good enough glimpse yourself on how this Pokemon plays and how it would do. So, now more than ever, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. But until next time, this is Groundback, and I look forward to hearing from you.